All right, let's get into it. Today, we're taking a closer look at a guy you definitely know, Benjamin Franklin. He's got this incredible title, the first American. But what does that even mean? To really get it, we have to look past the face on the $100 bill and see the man who didn't just help start a country. He basically wrote the instruction manual for being an American.
When you hear the name Benjamin Franklin, your mind probably goes right to the inventor, right? The guy with the kite and the key and a lightning storm pulling electricity right out of the sky. It's an amazing image for sure. But if that's all you think of, you're missing the most brilliant parts of his story.
Or maybe you picture the statesman, the wise old founding father, looking thoughtful and serious. And yeah, he was absolutely a pillar of the new republic, but that's still just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
And you can't forget the original American success story, right? The teenager who runs away to Philly with nothing, starts his own newspaper by 23, and becomes a household name with his super popular Poor Richard's Almanac. Classic rags to riches stuff. But what if I told you he was also a musician? Seriously, he invented new instruments like the glass harmonica, and he even composed music, like the very piece you're hearing right now. So Franklin was this incredible polymath, a master of so many different things. And his real genius wasn't in any one of them, but in how he mashed them all together to invent a totally new kind of person, the American citizen. So let's see how he did it. And we're going to start where he started, not on the world stage, but right in his own backyard. See, long before he was thinking about building a country, Franklin was focused on building a city. He had this powerful idea that a great society isn't created by kings or governments telling people what to do. No, it's built from the ground up by everyday citizens.
And he didn't just talk about it, he actually built it. Just think about this for a second. In Philadelphia, he started everything from a little club for self-improvement to America's very first lending library, which was a huge deal for making knowledge available to everyone, not just the rich. He organized the first volunteer fire department, and he even founded the first hospital in the colonies. Every single one of these was a radical idea back then, proving that ordinary people, when they worked together, could solve their own problems.
And he didn't stop with just his neighborhood. He set out to connect all the colonies. Franklin created America's first newspaper chain, a whole network that stretched from north to south. By the 1750s, he basically controlled over half the newspapers in the colonies. He wasn't just spreading news, he was spreading a common identity, a feeling that they were all in this together. Now, this whole idea of improving society, that connects directly to his famous inventions. But for Franklin, it was never ever about just making cool gadgets. It was all about the philosophy behind them, creating things for the common good.
This quote says it all. It was his guiding principle. That's why Franklin never patented a single one of his inventions. Not the lightning rod, which saved countless lives and homes. Not bifocals. Not even the Franklin stove, which made heating homes way more efficient. He truly believed these ideas were gifts that should be shared with everyone, freely and generously. And his practical, problem-solving mind is perfectly captured in one of his simplest, yet most brilliant inventions, a tool for thinking, the pro and con list. It was his method for making rational, clear-headed decisions. Just a simple, elegant piece of mental software that's just as powerful today as it was 250 years ago.
So you take this practical, community-building genius, and what happens when his brand new country asks him to go on the most important diplomatic mission in its history? Well, that's exactly what happened. The U.S. desperately needed France's help to win the revolution, so they sent their most famous citizen to the most powerful court in Europe.
And in Paris, he was an absolute rock star. They saw him as this rustic genius from the wilds of America, a man of nature. And he totally leaned into it, wearing a simple fur hat instead of some fancy wig. But underneath that charming act was a political mastermind. He completely played the French court and secured the military alliance that was absolutely essential to winning the war.
There's this great story where he's playing chess and captures his opponent's king. A duchess watching tells him, "Sir, we do not take kings so." And Franklin, without missing a beat, replies with maybe the best summary of the American Revolution ever. "We do in America." He was the living embodiment of this new, confident nation that wasn't going to play by the old world's stuffy rules anymore. But Franklin's story, just like America's story, is not a simple fairy tale. It is complicated. It's messy. He stood for the nation's highest ideals, like liberty and self-improvement, but he was also tangled up in its deepest, most painful contradictions.
And you see this nowhere more clearly than in his views on slavery. Early on,
He not only owned enslaved people himself, but his newspaper actually ran ads for slave auctions. But over the decades, he changed, he evolved. By the end of his life, he had become a passionate abolitionist. He was the president of an anti-slavery society, and his very last public act was to formally ask Congress to end slavery for good. His personal journey from slave owner to abolitionist is kind of the story of America itself, isn't it? It's a story of constant reinvention, a painful, ongoing struggle to live up to its own ideals. That was the unfinished work, as he called it, that he left for all of us.
Which brings us to his final and most famous challenge. As he was leaving the Constitutional Convention, a woman supposedly called out and asked him what kind of government they had created, and he replied, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." Think about that. It wasn't a statement, it was a challenge. A question that he wrestled with his whole life, and one that he passed on to every single one of us. What he was really asking is, can we?